Don't touch my kids. Mom said she threw me out at 17. 13 years later, a stranger said, pay. She showed up broke, begging me to pay for the sons she chose over me. There are moments in life that shatter your perception of everything you thought was true. For me, it was watching my own mother, Sarah, stand by, her eyes cold, while her husband, Mark Thompson, threatened to call the police on me, the kid she birthed, for trying to comfort her crying child. And then, her words, no one will ever love you. You're going to die alone and miserable, and you'll deserve it. Those weren't just words, they were a declaration of war. That night, the air in our perfectly manicured suburban colonial felt thick with a toxic mix of fear and disbelief. The overhead kitchen lights, usually so bright, cast long, distorted shadows as if even the house was struggling to make sense of the monstrous scene unfolding. Being an unexpected child means you spend your entire childhood fighting for a place in your own home. Sometimes the answer is just no. Today I'm 35, I pull in 155,000 as a senior project manager in commercial construction. I own my 4-bedroom house outright, bought it as a foreclosure, fixed it up myself, paid it off after a huge promotion. My F-150, paid off, savings, stacked. Not bad for someone who got kicked out at 17 because they didn't fit in with the new family. Sarah gave birth to me when she was 21. My bio, Dad bolted the second he heard about the pregnancy. No help, nothing. We lived over my grandparents' garage while she finished nursing school. She worked like crazy, but my grandpa really raised me. He taught me about work ethic, how to fix things, how to stand my ground. When I was 9, Sarah met Mark Thompson at the hospital, a family therapist with a psychology degree. Good money, good image. They married when I was 12, and we moved into his 4-bedroom colonial. Mark Thompson wasn't overtly mean. He just treated me like I was invisible. Dinners always devolved into future chats about him and Sarah, while I was just nodded at and completely ignored. When I was 13, Sarah got pregnant with twins, Caleb and Ethan. Her pregnancy was rough, so I basically became the household manager. Laundry, cooking, mowing, yard work. I figured if I was productive, if I made myself indispensable, maybe I'd earn my place. When the twins arrived that April, everyone was ecstatic. Relatives swarmed. Mark Thompson took time off. Our home turned into non-stop baby central, and I was practically erased. Not just a busy parent, it was like Sarah had stopped seeing me altogether. So, I did what kids do when they believe love is earned. I tried harder. Straight A's, all the chores, being quiet, being unseen. Turns out, you can't act your way into being wanted. I lived in that house from 13 to 17 and I barely existed. By the time I was 17 and the twins were 5, I'd mastered the art of invisibility. Mark Thompson spoke as if Caleb and Ethan were the only children on Earth. My guys needed this? My guys were doing that? Never. The children. Never the family. Never anything involving me. Pretty quarters for a man whose job was to help families communicate, huh? If they even remembered, my birthday present was usually a gas station gift card and a crumpled 25 bill. The twins' birthday parties. Bouncy houses, face painters, a swarm of preschoolers trashing the yard. Mark Thompson grilled like it was a TV show. Sarah was always posting about her lovely babies on social media. I stopped expecting anything. I focused on school, worked weekends at an auto shop, and saved every single penny. My gut told me I'd need it to leave. My gut was right, I just didn't realize how soon. One Tuesday evening in October of my junior year, I got home from my shift at the shop at 6:30 p.m. Sarah and Mark Thompson had gone to a business gathering. She'd mentioned it that morning. Their usual babysitter canceled last minute, so they decided I was old enough to watch the twins for a few hours. It was the first time they'd ever trusted me with it. I was actually looking forward to it. I wondered if this was a sign they were finally starting to see me as part of the family again. When I walked in, Caleb and Ethan were watching cartoons. Everything seemed fine. Totally normal. Around 80-odred, Ethan got cranky. Then Caleb started. Both of them were weeping, wanting Sarah. I tried everything: food, their favorite TV show, building blocks. Nothing worked. They just kept wailing louder. Caleb was on the verge of a full meltdown, that gasping for air kind. I picked him up, held him on my hip, just like I'd seen Sarah do 100 times. I bounced him a little, telling him it was okay. Sarah would be home soon. Just trying to calm him down before he made himself sick. That's when I heard the front door open. Sarah and Mark Thompson walked in, and what they saw was me holding Caleb, with Ethan still sobbing on the couch. Sarah's expression went from worry to pure rage in about half a second. Before I could explain, before I could say anything, she darted across the room and snatched Caleb from my arms. The child was already scared, and my mom just made him sob even harder. "What did you do to them?" she demanded, looking Caleb over as if I'd hurt him. "Nothing. They just wanted you." I was trying to calm him down. The smack came out of nowhere, powerful enough to whip my head to the side and make my ear ring. I just stood there stunned, hand pressed to my face. "Don't you ever touch them," she shrieked. Mark Thompson stepped between us, and his face, it made my stomach plummet, not worry, not bewilderment, but revulsion. "Why would you touch my kids?" His voice was cold, professional, maybe the same tone he used with patients he'd already dismissed. "What's wrong with you?" "They were crying." I was just, "You were supposed to watch them, not put your hands on them." He got closer, squeezing into my space. I knew then. This was a mistake. We knew it was a mistake. We knew we couldn't trust you around them. Something inside me just cracked. 4 years of being invisible, of being treated like I didn't matter. And now this. I shoved him back. Not hard, just enough to get him out of my face. "Back off! I didn't do anything wrong." Mark Thompson grabbed my shirt and yanked me closer. "You stinky little piece of trash! You put your filthy hands on my boy!" "You get him out," Sarah said, her voice quivering with rage. "Get him out of this house right now." "You're insane," I said, looking from one to the other. "I was watching them like you asked. They got upset. I was trying to help." Sarah's face contorted into something truly ugly. "No one will ever love you. You're going to die alone and miserable, and you'll deserve it." The words landed harder than the smack. I just stared at her, at the woman who was supposed to be my mother, and all I saw was hatred. Mark Thompson hauled me towards the door. "Get your stuff and get out. You've got 18 minutes before I call the cops and tell them you assaulted me and did something inappropriate with those boys." That threat silenced me. I looked at Sarah, expecting her to say something, to tell him he was insane. She just stood there, clutching Caleb, her countenance blank. I walked to my room in a fog, grabbed 2 duffel bags, and started shoving everything inside. Clothes, laptop, school books, my box of photographs with Grandpa. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely zip the bags. I kept replaying what had happened, trying to make sense of it. 18 minutes later, I passed them on my way out. They were sitting in the living room with the twins, who had already settled down, probably forgotten what they were crying over. I paused at the entrance and turned around. "You're both sick, and you're going to regret this." Mark Thompson grinned. "The only regret here is that we wasted 17 years on you. Your own Sarah thinks you're a waste of space." Then they laughed. "Good luck finding someone who will care about you." I walked 2 miles to my grandparents' house in the dark. Those duffel bags dug into my shoulders the whole trip. My cheeks still ached from the slap. My ears were still ringing. What hurt the most was realizing that after 17 years, that's all I was worth to her. An accusation and 18 minutes to pack. Grandpa opened the door, took one look at me standing there with my bags and my face scarlet from the smack, and his expression hardened. What happened? I told him everything. The twins crying, me trying to help, the accusation, the slap, the threats. I watched his expression darken with each phrase. "That's it," he stated calmly. "We're done with her." Grandma came up behind him, saw me, and quickly pulled me inside. She started weeping before I could even finish explaining. "Did she strike you? What about her own son?" "She's made her decision," Grandpa replied, placing his hand on my shoulder. "And we have made ours. You're ours now. Not just tonight, but for good." Something snapped that first night as I stared at the ceiling in the spare bedroom. I was finished with Sarah. Done hoping she'd remember I exist. Done waiting for her to pick me up. It was only me now. And it felt wonderful to know where I stood. My grandparents did more than just provide me with shelter and food. They went to war for me. Within 3 days, Grandpa called a lawyer about guardianship. Sarah readily signed temporary custody paperwork without even speaking to me first, probably wanting to prevent CPS or the police from investigating what truly happened that night. By the end of the week, I was legally in their custody. They cut her off entirely. Grandpa wanted to make a police report on Mark Thompson's threats, but the lawyer advised against it. She said securing custody was the top objective. A police case could drag out or force Sarah to fight guardianship. Better to get me safe now than deal with repercussions later. My grandparents changed their wills, stopped taking her calls, and declared her dead to them. When family inquired about what had transpired, Grandpa gave them the brutal truth. She slapped our grandson, kicked him out, and blamed him for things he didn't do to justify it. "We're finished." I spent the next 3 years working 22 to 28 hours a week at the neighborhood hardware store. That money went towards school supplies, clothes, and gas for the beat-up car Grandpa had given me. My grades dropped from straight A's to primarily B's, yet I still graduated with a 3.5 good enough. Sarah remained utterly silent. No texts or calls for birthdays, holidays, or graduations. I only heard about their nicer cars, the twins' lavish parties, and weekend beach getaways through the grapevine. It's funny how concerns about inappropriate conduct faded once I wasn't their financial burden. Senior year, I got accepted into a couple of institutions. Even with scholarships, I needed a loan which required an adult co-signer. When I mentioned it over supper, my aunt Linda Miller didn't flinch. She said she'd co-sign. I tried to protest, but she shut it down. She'd seen me work hard since I was sent out, and she wasn't about to let me miss out on college because of Sarah. College was a grind. I worked full-time on campus, pulled weekend overnight shifts at a warehouse, did odd jobs, taught myself basic CAD and freelance designs for small contractors. Sleep was optional. Sarah remained mute. I periodically saw her immaculate family posts through relatives and eventually just blocked her. Not my problem. 5 years later, I invited Linda Miller to my graduation. She arrived early and celebrated like she'd won too. Sarah had no idea I was graduating. I didn't tell her. After graduation, I accepted an entry-level project coordinator position with a commercial construction business 5 hours away. Started at $42,000, moved into a small apartment, lived cheaply, and worked as if my job was the only thing keeping the lights on. I learned everything, took on extra tasks, and kept climbing. By my late 20s, I'd paid off most of my loans and started saving aggressively. At 27, I found a repossessed 4-bedroom home in need of serious TLC. I got it cheap. I spent evenings and weekends sprucing it up myself. Everything Grandpa taught me finally paid off. We took out a modest mortgage to complete the transaction, but the monthly payments were affordable. By my late 20s, I'd amassed significant funds and had the good apartment mostly refurbished. Sarah and I maintained zero communication. Then, around the age of 30, promoted to senior PM, my salary jumped from $82,000 to $155,000. The raise was massive. Within 4 years, I'd paid off the mortgage completely and increased my savings even further. I kept it quiet. The only one I informed was Linda Miller. She, bless her heart, discussed it during a family gathering in the hopes that it would thaw things. That's what ignited the fuse. About a week after Linda Miller's slip, I had a knock on my door late on a Saturday afternoon. Wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and saw Sarah and Mark Thompson standing there. I hadn't seen either of them in over a decade. I couldn't think of a single good reason why they were on my doorstep now. I gently opened the door, but did not move aside or invite them in. They surged past me into my home without waiting for an invitation. Mark Thompson went right to it. I heard about your promotion. Took you long enough to make anything of yourself? No hello, no, how have you been? Just a backhanded remark masquerading as a compliment. Sarah interrupted before I could answer. Caleb and Ethan require assistance with college fees. Things have grown tighter recently. We assumed you could help out now that you're doing so well. I stood there for a long time, just absorbing. After more than a decade of silence, after everything they'd done, they had the audacity to turn up and demand payment. The absolute balls on these individuals. I folded my arms and leaned against the wall, very calm. You've got about 45 seconds to get out of my house before I make you leave. Mark Thompson sneered. Don't be dramatic. You're making good money now. No wife, no kids draining your resources. You've clearly got money sitting there. Stop acting like you can't afford to help your own brothers. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. My brothers. These children have nothing to do with me. You made this quite evident when you booted me out and threatened to lie to the cops about me. Remember that. Sarah's face stiffened. Oh, wonderful. Poor you. We had a difficult decision when you were younger. Get over it already. Look at you now. You came out nicely? Yeah? I said. And it's getting colder. No thanks to any of you. I worked my way through college with no support from you. I made it happen despite you, not because of you. So, let me simplify this for both of you. The answer is no. Not a single cent or penny. You are not receiving anything from me. Mark Thompson took a step closer, hoping to intimidate me with his bulk. Perhaps you should thank us. If we hadn't pushed you out, you probably wouldn't be where you are now. We did you a favor. The least you can do is assist your family when they need it. I stood up, met his gaze firmly, and did not back down an inch. Thank you. Thank you for justifying tossing out your stepson. You accused him of improper behavior around youngsters. You threatened to lie to the police. You made the youngsters believe I had wounded them while attempting to assist. And now you want me to bail out your Adil family. That is an impressive sum. Sarah's voice became harsh. You're being selfish. I reared you on my own. I worked my tail hard to keep you alive. Now that you have everything, we'd like to ask for a little help from your siblings. You owe them at least that amount. I don't owe them anything. I insisted firmly. You made certain decisions about me. You decided I didn't deserve your time, attention, or money. That's your responsibility. I'm not going to put my life or my money at risk for youngsters you told me were unsafe around. The reasoning doesn't add up, does it? If I was such a threat back then, why would you want me to aid them now? Mark Thompson's cheeks became crimson. Do you know what your problem is? You have always been bitter. I always felt you were exceptional. You assume you're superior than your family just because you have a good job. But allow me to tell you something. You meant nothing to our family then, and you still don't. I just grinned. So why are you here? If I don't mean anything, why are you begging for money? Sounds desperate. It sounds like you need me more than I need you. Sarah snapped. Because we did not want to come here! Do you believe we love asking for your help? However, Caleb and Ethan deserve a future. And if you weren't so selfish, you would notice it. They deserve better parents who did not make poor decisions, I stated quietly. That is not my problem. Now get out of my home. Mark Thompson pointed at my face, his voice increasing. You'd better watch your mouth. We are still your family whether you like it or not. I took a step forward directly into his space. I watched him instinctively take a half step back. Family does not do what you did. Families do not slap their children, accuse them of horrible things, and then throw them out with only 18 minutes to pack. You are not my family. You're just strangers who showed up hoping to guilt-trip me into solving problems you created. It is not happening. Sarah's expression twisted. Okay, be a selfish brat, but don't come crying to us if your perfect life falls apart. You believe you are far superior to everyone else. But you are nothing special. You will always be nothing, just as I told you that night. Nobody will ever love you. You will die alone. If that's true, I replied quietly. At the very least, I will die knowing that I did not become like you. Finally, get out. Go ahead, Mark Thompson said, hoping to reclaim some ground. Call the police. See how it looks calling the police on your own parents. I took out my phone, already dialing. You aren't my parents. You forfeited that right when you hit me and threw me out. You have 12 seconds before the cops arrive to remove trespassers. Sarah grabbed Mark Thompson's arm. This isn't over, she yelled toward me. You're going to regret this. Everyone's going to see what kind of person you really are. No, I replied, holding the door open and holding the phone to my ear. Everyone's going to see what kind of people you really are. I promise you that. They left. I gave the dispatcher my address and described the situation. They dispatched an officer to take a report. I documented everything. That confrontation wasn't just satisfying, it explained everything I needed to know. They'd come thinking they could manipulate, guilt, and intimidate me. Instead, they'd encountered a man who had spent over a decade transforming himself into someone they couldn't approach. Someone who did not require their approval, affection, or recognition. Someone who was finally prepared to go nuclear. I thought that confrontation would be the end of it. Should have known they wouldn't give up so easily. 3 weeks later, I learned from concerned co-workers that Sarah had arrived at my office. I had taken a sick day, which likely saved me from a worse situation. But according to what I heard, she marched into the lobby of our secure commercial building, demanded to speak with me, and when security informed her I wasn't there, she refused to leave. She started shouting about family obligations and sacrifices, about how ungrateful I was, and became aggressive. Building security eventually had to physically escort her off the property. Several co-workers witnessed the entire thing. It was embarrassing as hell. The next day at work felt terrible. I apologized to everyone who'd seen that nightmare, went straight to HR, explained the situation, had her name added to the official list of people not permitted on company premises, and had her photo on file with building security. The whole thing was embarrassing, but she still wasn't done. That same week, I got home from work and found her waiting outside my house, pacing up and down my driveway, clearly agitated. The second I got out of my truck with my work bag, she stormed over. You can't keep ignoring me! We need to talk about this right now! I kept my distance, keys in my hand. What are you doing here? I told you we're done. We need to have a real conversation! You can't just walk away from your responsibilities to your brothers. What responsibilities? You're the parent. Caleb and Ethan are your kids, not mine. Figure it out yourself. That set her off completely. She started screaming about how selfish and ungrateful I was, how I owed her everything for raising me alone. I sacrificed everything for you, she shouted. And this is how you repay me? You didn't sacrifice anything for me. Go home. Don't show up here again. Her voice went from loud to hysterical. She started yelling so loudly that neighbors began coming out to see what was happening. He's a brat, she screamed, gesturing at me. Always been selfish, doesn't care about anyone but himself. Several neighbors tried to calm her down, but she was way past hearing anyone. Then she actually lunged at me. "Still scray back," I warned, already dialing 911. "I mean it. Don't you dare call the police on your own mother," she shrieked, trying to grab the phone from my hands. "I raised you. I sacrificed everything. You abandoned me," I said loudly, holding the phone away. "Threw me away like garbage!" One of my neighbors yelled that he was also calling the cops. Another physically stepped in and pulled her back. By that point, sirens were already cutting through the evening air. The responding officers separated us, took statements from me, and multiple witnesses. Sarah tried to play the victim, crying about how I'd turned my back on my struggling family. But 3 neighbors had seen her lunge at me, heard her screaming. One had even started recording on his phone. The officers didn't arrest her. They treated it like a family dispute, separated us, gave her a stern warning, documented everything, and told me I should get a restraining order if this continued. Classic domestic call response. They filed the incident report and left. She sat in her car at the end of the street for another hour before driving away. But that incident was the push I needed. Because while she was sitting in her car that night, I was inside my house making a decision. Time to find out exactly why they were really broke and make sure everyone knew the truth. The next morning, I took time off work and went to the police station. I filed for the restraining order based on the workplace incident and the driveway assault. The officer who'd responded the night before had filed a detailed report with witness statements, which helped move things along. But before the hearing, I did my homework. I wanted to know exactly what had destroyed their finances. 2 nurses making decent money don't go from comfortable to desperate overnight. I started with Mark Thompson's professional license. Public records are public for a reason. The state licensing board website had everything laid out. License suspended pending investigation. Formal complaint filed by 3 former clients. Ethics violations, including inappropriate dual relationships, boundary violations, and improper termination of therapeutic relationships. The details were clinical but damning. I kept digging. Found the civil lawsuits next. Mark Thompson being sued by 2 former patients for emotional distress and malpractice. One case involved him developing a personal relationship with a vulnerable client and then abruptly ending therapy when it got complicated. Another involved him taking on a client while simultaneously having a social relationship with that client's spouse. Basic ethics violations that any first-year therapist knows to avoid, but it got worse. I found allegations in court filings about a federal audit, Medicaid and Medicare fraud investigation, with claims Mark Thompson had been billing for sessions that never happened. Billing couples therapy when only one person attended. Coding session types to get higher reimbursements. Public docket entries laid it out. Systematic billing issues that don't happen by accident. The hospital cut ties with him immediately when the investigation started. His malpractice insurance dropped him. He was looking at potential criminal charges, massive civil penalties, and complete financial ruin. The man who made his living telling people how to fix their lives couldn't follow basic professional ethics. The hypocrisy was almost funny, if it wasn't so pathetic. A family therapist who specialized in helping families communicate and maintain boundaries, who'd built his career on professional ethics and helping vulnerable people, had systematically violated every rule in the book. And the same man who'd accused his teenage stepson of inappropriate behavior with children had been engaging in inappropriate relationships with vulnerable adult clients. I compiled everything, every board action, every lawsuit, every audit notice, public records anyone could verify. When I told my grandparents everything, they were furious. "She's lost her mind," Grandpa said, shaking his head. "Coming after you like this, while her husband destroys everything through his own choices." Grandma's voice was heavy with disgust. A therapist, someone people trusted to help them, and he was using them like that. Sick. "They deserve each other," I said, "and they're going to get exactly what they deserve." The restraining order hearing came about 4 weeks later. The judge reviewed the police reports, witness statements, and documented harassment pattern. Sarah showed up with some story about being a concerned parent, tried the tears, but the evidence spoke louder than her performance. The judge granted a 4-year order without much deliberation. After the order went into effect, the direct harassment stopped. No more showing up at my work or house. But she found workarounds. Started calling me from different numbers. I blocked every single one. Sent letters to my house that went straight into my documentation folder. Got relatives to reach out on her behalf with messages about how she just wanted to talk and work things out. I shut that down immediately, told them I had no interest in reconciliation and they needed to stop carrying her messages. Most family members backed off after that. She even tried showing up at my grandparents' house a few times, demanding they make me see reason. My grandparents called her out hard every time, told her to leave and never come back. When she refused the third time, Grandpa called the cops himself. They gave her a citation for trespassing and reminded her about the restraining order. Coming to my grandparents' house to harass them about me counted as indirect contact. That finally got her to back off for a while. Life finally started looking normal again. I threw myself into work, my house, and the people who actually mattered, my grandparents, Linda Miller, a couple of close friends. I installed security cameras, kept my documentation folder updated, and focused on moving forward. A few months after things quieted down, I started taking care of the people who'd taken care of me. First were my grandparents. I paid for the new roof they'd been putting off, covered their property taxes for the year, and set up a medical fund so they'd never have to stress about bills again. They tried to refuse. I told them it wasn't negotiable. They gave me everything when I had nothing. Linda Miller was next. I didn't want to just repay her. I wanted her to feel what she did for me. So, I planned a long weekend trip to the Grand Canyon for her whole family, something she talked about for years, but never did because she was always putting everyone else first. I covered flights, a decent hotel, and gave her spending money for food and activities so she could actually enjoy it without doing mental math the whole time. When I handed her the envelope, she opened it and just froze. "What's this?" "It's for you," I told her. "You showed up when nobody else did. You deserve something good." She started shaking her head, saying she didn't help me for anything back. I told her that was the point. She hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. And for the first time in a long time, I felt what it's like to be valued instead of tolerated. Of course, word got around fast. Linda Miller was excited and told family. Within days, it got back to Sarah, and she lost her mind. She started calling from new numbers, leaving increasingly unhinged voicemails about how I could afford vacations and gifts, but wouldn't pay for my brother's college, accusing me of rubbing my success in her face, asking how I could give money to anyone else when family was struggling. Every voicemail went straight into the documentation folder. Caleb and Ethan started reaching out too, probably through relatives or Sarah handing them my number. Same energy, not humble, not sincere, just entitled, bitter, jealous. Why was I playing favorites with Linda Miller? Why did I think I was too good for them? Why was I being petty? I didn't respond. I saved everything. And that was the last straw. I'd been patient. I'd documented the harassment, and I'd given them every chance to back off. They didn't. So, I decided it was time to make sure everyone knew exactly who they were and what they'd done. I started by writing everything out. Not an emotional rant, just a clean timeline with receipts. The night I was 7, the twins crying, me trying to help, the slap, the accusations, the threats, the decade of silence. Then Sarah and Mark Thompson showing up demanding money. After that, the workplace scene, the driveway incident, the restraining order, and Caleb and Ethan's entitled messages. The real leverage was Mark Thompson's professional collapse. I didn't vaguely reference it. I linked the state licensing board documents showing his suspended license, included redacted excerpts from the ethics complaints showing the pattern of boundary violations and dual relationships, and attached links to the civil lawsuits and fraud investigation, all public record, all verifiable. The story basically wrote itself. A family therapist obsessed with ethics and boundaries, violating the rules for years. The same guy who accused his teenage stepson of being inappropriate, then threw him out with threats. And once the consequences hit, they came looking for money from the kid they discarded. I didn't post it publicly. That would have been a mess. I sent it directly to the family members who mattered and who Sarah had been working for sympathy. My grandparents, siblings, cousins, key people in the extended family. Every claim backed by documents, public records, and screenshots. I attached one note. Since there's confusion, here's the timeline with documentation. Draw your own conclusions. The reaction wasn't instant because real family drama isn't a movie. Over the next few weeks, relatives reached out privately to apologize for buying her version. A few admitted they'd been considering helping her financially and were glad they saw the truth first. Others were disgusted by Mark Thompson's violations, especially the ones who had connections to the mental health world or knew people who'd seen him as a therapist. That's where it really hurt. Word spread through his former colleagues and professional network. The reputation he'd spent his life polishing didn't just crack, it caved in. He went from respected professional to that therapist. Some older relatives tried to play mediator with the usual forgiveness speeches and family loyalty guilt. I shut it down immediately, told them I appreciated the concern, but the conversation was closed. They could have whatever relationship they wanted with her. I was done. After that, it spread quietly. Private calls, side conversations, people making up their own minds. Sarah's support network started shrinking. Linda Miller told me relatives stopped returning her calls, made excuses when she tried to set things up, or just went silent. The cousins who used to help with money and favors suddenly had their own problems. Sarah tried to claim I ruined everything, and she was the victim. It didn't stick. Police reports are police reports. Court documents are court documents. Licensing board actions are public record. Her voicemails and Caleb and Ethan's messages were saved verbatim. The pattern was obvious. Caleb and Ethan tried defending her in the family group chat, which only made it worse because people could see the same entitled tone I'd already included. They came off exactly as they were, kids, raised to think they were owed support, confused why the brother they never treated like family wouldn't bankroll them. The best part was hearing multiple relatives say they'd been close to helping Sarah and the twins financially before they saw the packet. After they did, those doors slammed shut. She'd been working the family for money, and I killed that plan. The fallout wasn't some dramatic explosion. It was just done. Invitations stopped. People were busy. Her usual circle pulled back in slow motion. Then Mark Thompson's situation got worse. One of the civil lawsuits went to trial. The testimony dragged out years of ethics violations and manipulative behavior with vulnerable clients, including using his position to start inappropriate relationships. He lost badly. The judgment was big enough. They had to sell the house. The 4-bedroom colonial he'd inherited and never paid for was gone. They ended up in a 2-bedroom apartment in a worse part of town. Sarah was working double shifts to cover rent and legal fees. Caleb and Ethan were working fast food because they'd burned through connections trying to land better opportunities, and being tied to a disgraced therapist didn't help. After I sent the documentation, I got about 9 months of silence. No harassment, no manipulation, nothing. I thought it was finally over. Then, on a cold Friday evening in late November, I pulled into my driveway after work and noticed a car parked across the street. Didn't think much of it at first. Neighbors have guests. But as I got out of my truck, I saw Sarah sitting in the driver's seat, watching my house. Just sitting there, not getting out, not approaching, just watching. I grabbed my work bag, went inside through the garage and closed the door, pulled up my security camera feed on my phone. She was still there. 20 minutes passed. 30, still there. I called the non-emergency police line, explained the situation. Someone with a restraining order against her was parked across from my house, lingering for over half an hour. She was just outside the 600 for boundary specified in the order, but I wanted it documented. The dispatcher sent an officer to check it out. 20 minutes later, a cruiser pulled up. I watched through my camera feed as the officer approached her car. They talked for maybe 7 minutes. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see her gesturing, probably explaining she was sitting in her car on a public street. The officer came to my door. I stepped out onto the porch. She says she just wants to talk to you, he said. Claims it's important. Says she has nowhere else to turn. He asked if I'd be willing to hear her out. I looked past him at the car, saw Sarah staring at me with this desperate look I'd never seen before. Not the manipulative tears from before, just exhaustion and desperation. No, I said flatly. She had years to talk, multiple chances to approach this differently. She made her choices. The officer nodded. That's your right. She's outside the 600 for boundary, so technically not violating, but I'll let her know you're not interested and she needs to leave the area. He went back to her car. More conversation. I saw her slump in her seat, put her hands over her face. The officer kept talking, probably explaining she needed to leave. Finally, she started her car, but before pulling away, she got out. The officer immediately moved to intercept her, but she wasn't approaching my house. She just stood by her car door, looking at me across the street. Please, she called out, voice cracking. Just 7 minutes. We've lost everything. Mark Thompson can't work. Caleb and Ethan can't finish school. We're about to be evicted. We need help. The officer positioned himself between us, told her she needed to get back in her car. You did this? She continued, voice getting louder despite the officer's warnings. You turned everyone against us. You destroyed our lives because you're bitter about decisions made years ago. We are family. You're supposed to help. I stood there on my porch, completely calm, and let her finish. The officer was getting more stern, telling her this was her last warning before he called for backup, and she'd be arrested. When she finally stopped to take a breath, I spoke, my voice level, carrying across the street. Her face wrinkled. I apologize. I'm very sorry. I was mistaken. Please, I'm begging you. Help us. Those are just words, said. You had over a decade to apologize. You chose silence. Chose to only reach out when you wanted money. Chose to harass me when I said no. You don't get to call that family. The officer physically guided her back toward her car door. She was crying now, saying something about mistakes and still being my mother. How could I be so heartless when they were losing everything? Ma'am, get in your car now or you're going to jail, the officer said firmly. She finally got in, sat there for a few more seconds, just staring at me, tears streaming down her face, then drove away slowly. The officer came back to my porch. You want to file a report on this? It's borderline. She didn't technically violate the order, but the intent was clearly to contact you. Yeah, I said, file the report. I want this on record. He nodded, took my statement and left. I went back inside locked up, pulled out my phone. Sarah showed up outside my house tonight. Cops handled it. I am fine. Her response came immediately. Need me to come over? I smiled and typed back. No, I'm good. Really good. And I sat on my couch and thought about the kid I was at 17, carrying my life in 2 duffel bags. I built everything myself. Linda Miller and my grandparents were the only ones who showed up. I was good. If you've ever felt that soul-crushing betrayal from family, or had to cut toxic people out of your life, you know how hard it is to finally stand your ground. What's the toughest boundary you've ever had to set with someone you once called family? Let me know in the comments below. I'm reading every single one.